This is Lori Stein, and I am here with Albert Kaufman on dating and the interesting man. And I am so excited to have Albert on as my first guest because he is one of the most interesting men that I know. Um, he is a community activist. He has so many incredible, helpful projects going on that I can't even count. He is a Burning Man participant. He is a mensch, though for those of you who are not familiar with that Yiddish term, it means he is a really, really good guy. And I am so excited to be talking to him about dating and his opinions and what makes him so interesting. So, Albert, can you please tell us about some of these wonderful projects you're working on, as well as, how to find out more?
Sure. Well, thanks for inviting me on to talk with you today, Lori. As you mentioned, I'm Albert Kaufman. I live in Portland, Oregon. I'm 63 and I'm originally from the East Coast. And I've been single for 6 years and dating somewhat during that time. In terms of the projects that I'm working on right now, it sort of comes down to two main things. One is getting rid of gas-powered leaf blowers for myself and for my city, Portland, Oregon, but also beyond. Our group has actually gotten a ban here in Portland, Oregon just recently, and we're working now to help the rest of the country and the rest of the world stop having to listen to and smell the exhaust of gas-powered leaf blowers. And then the other area that I spend a lot of time in has to do with trees. And I'm the founder of a group in Portland called We Keep Trees Standing. Our aim is to keep trees standing and to plant new trees and to really have a effect on our city's canopy. And that effort also expands out into the world. We have a lot of people from around the world who are in our group, and we also um, sort of comment on things that are happening outside of Portland as well as things that are happening inside of Portland. But I've been doing different kinds of projects in my life for the last 25 years or so. I'd say I grew up in a youth movement called Habonim, which means the builders. And it's a labor Zionist youth movement, and it is based on the kibbutz movement and like living communally and sharing things and cooperating, collaborating. And that had really formed my basis for the activism that I've been doing for many years. So those are some answers. And in terms of how to find me, I have a website called albertideation.com, and that also has marketing ideas because I've been doing a marketing company for the last 16 years. And my main form of marketing is email marketing, and it's newsletters. And on that website, people can sign up for a newsletter if they want to learn more about the different things that I'm working on. But I also have newsletters around humor and newsletters around what I'm doing in life and which festivals I'm attending this summer. For instance, I also send out a newsletter for people's birthdays. That goes out to about 1,200 people. So I've been mixing the marketing information that I have with the activism work that I do in a way that feels very natural and organic to me, but I feel like it's very unusual in the world. So it's very exciting to um, have those two skills, like an umph and an interest in tikkun olam and repairing the world, and then also being able to organize people and activate people to take action. And it didn't used to be that so many people were activists, but since Trump came along and climate change has come along, people have gotten more and more activated. And it's very exciting to have more people involved in trying to change our world for the better. So I'm happy to be a little bit of a trailblazer in that world, and at the same time, an old fogey who's looking for people to pass my skills along to, because I won't be able to do what I do forever. So I'm a bit mixed in those areas. Yeah, thanks for asking. Thanks for having me today.
Oh, yes. And Albert, one of the things I really, really like about you, and one of the reasons that to me you are such a mensch, is the way you bring people together. And I'm really thinking about a conversation that you and I had once about a game. And I think it was almost like kind of bingo where, you would look for certain things and carry cards. And I just wanted to touch a little bit about, this place community holds in your heart, and how, you know, you use that as kind of a glue
Hmm.
to, bring the fabric of humanity closer together.
Yeah. Well, one of my favorite songs right now is called Crowded Table, and it's by the High Women. And the chorus is, I want to live, I want a house with a crowded table and a place at the fire for everyone. And I really do, from my earliest days, I've always really enjoyed singing and being together in groups of people. And, there's a lot that you can do with a group that you can't do by yourself. I do a lot of solo activism, but when you have a group of 6 or 7 people working together on an issue, you can really kind of spur each other on to greater heights and actually have, I think, a bigger impact. Um, and you just reminded me of another project that I have simmering right now. I wouldn't say it's very active, but it could be activated at any moment. And it's called funconference.me. And that comes out of some of the things that you were talking about, like gamifying things and unconferencing. And I spent a number of years going to Burning Man, where there's a who, what, where book that helps guide you to go to different activities that people are putting on for each other. And last weekend, I went to my 29th Brighton Bush Summer Solstice Healing Retreat, where we put on workshops for each other. And the World Domination Summit took place in Portland for 10 years. I went to the last 3 years, and that is filled with activities that people put on for each other. And so the idea with funconference.me is I'm putting a lot of that thinking and memories and history and guidance together into a something that I think that could be templated and be used by anyone, anywhere, to gather people in a specific location. Yeah, it's also a way to support local businesses. It's also a way for people to come together and learn from each other. So there's a lot of crossover for it. So it's funconference.me. That leads people to a uh, Google form that kind of explains what funconference.me is about, but also asks you if you'd like to be a participant and what kind of participant, whether you'd like to be leading a class or you'd like to be just coming along for the ride. And I've got about 40 people signed up for it. And the first one that I intend to do will probably take place in the rectangle that surrounds my house, which is the borders are Division Street, 50th Avenue, Hawthorne Avenue, and Cesar Chavez. And that's about I guess maybe a mile square or something like that. And it's got amazing businesses all the way around it. There's a few theaters, there's plenty of restaurants, cafes, lots of spaces that can be used for gathering, for playing games, for tarot card readings, whatever. And so I'm excited to at some point pull the trigger and have everybody uh, be activated for at least a day. And with the anniversary of the World Domination Summit sort of happening right now, I've been feeling a lot of energy around actually having the first funconference.me. And the fun tagline that my housemate has come up with is funconference.me, because if you're not having fun at funconference.me, whose fault is that?
That's hilarious. And I also want to touch on something. So your Burning Man theme camp, the post office,
Oh,
very
yes.
interactive as well. And maybe even, something that could be brought into Camp Real World. I don't know.
Mm. Well, the post office at Burning Man, now there are 3 post offices. That, boy, that's a whole conversation. I mean, one of the reasons I went back to Burning Man so many times, and I went 14 times, is because I found the post office think it was my second or third year, I first went to the post office and interacted with that theme camp. And after that, I was hooked. I had such a fun experience twice with the post office that I decided to join with them the following year. And then I never really left. I've always been participating with that theme camp the most, every Burning Man, delivering mail, making mail, working windows, and just spreading the gospel of the postal system. And even when I'm not at Burning Man, I still manage the Facebook page for the post office, and we also have a Facebook group. There have been websites. There's an email list, of course, for people who are interested in the post office. And even though I haven't attended Burning Man in the last 9 years, I still actually am pretty involved in um, the postal activities, you might say, delivering things and just encouraging people to participate in that world. So yeah, I still use the mail USPS probably more than your average bear. When it was my birthday this past May, I wrote to a list of people who get a email newsletter on their birthday from me. It's automated, and but each year it's different, and I've been doing it for 7 or 8 years now. And I wrote to all of them, and I said, "Hey, you know what? This year I'd really like to get a birthday card. If you're in the mood, no pressure, but send me a birthday card." And I got, I don't know, 30 or 40 birthday cards, and it was so much fun. Like every day, 3 or 4 birthday cards would come, and some of them were from people I didn't know, and some were from people who I know really well, and it was just a real treat. So I may actually ask that again, and we'll see, where that goes. But also for New Year's, I send out a New Year's card to folks, and so that's a lot of fun as well.
So I just want to mention for people not familiar with Burning Man or the post office. So basically, the way the post office works is anybody at the event can walk up to the window and they'll give you some mail, and it'll have somebody's name and their theme camp. And you basically have to find this person.
Hmm.
And, the only way to do it, I mean, you can definitely find their theme camp if it's a registered theme camp. But if not, I mean, either way, you're going to have to ask around and you're going to have to talk to people. And it's a really terrific way to interact. And the other thing about the post office that's very exciting is it is a real functional post office. You can send somebody a package at Burning Man. And if you're at Burning Man, you can send somebody a package or a postcard from Burning Man. Albert, can you send a package or is it just a postcard?
It depends who you know. And I wouldn't say that you should also know that anything that you say about Burning Man, uh, there are no sure things. So as much as we try to say, oh, well, you can walk up to a window and they will give you mail and you can go deliver it. Some of that is true, but some of that might not be true. There might not be any mail. The person behind the window may have other ideas of what your interaction is going to be about. It's a little, I'd like to describe it as improvisational theater, because the person behind the window may be more interested in having you fill out a form, or they might have an errand for you to run, or they may decide as they see you coming that they're closing their window and going on a smoke break. You really don't know what exactly is going to happen, and that's a lot of the fun of it too. In fact, a lot of people walk up to the window and they just really don't understand. It's 2 o'clock in the morning and there's a neon sign and there's a person underneath it, and they think, okay, well, it looks like it could be postally related, but really, is this a post office? And then, yeah, like some of the things you said, you can actually mail on the playa or off playa. And you can also receive things at Burning Man that have come from Turkey. Like it is a functioning post office for a week. And there's a stamp, there's a franking system so that your mail, when it goes out, that's it. It's franked right there. And so it's an official post office. We have our own zip code for the week. So that, which is, yeah, there's lots to say about the post office, and it has certainly influenced me in so many ways. It's really gotten me interested in improv I've actually in the last year taken 2 improv classes, just to get more involved in that world. I really enjoy improv and theater. I also like, one of my talents is to play guitar and sing. And so I know a lot of songs. When I was 15, I learned all the songs of the time, all the Eagles and the Grateful Dead and Dylan. All the lyrics went in, and so they're luckily still in there pretty well intact. But I've also gotten pretty good at improvising and making up songs off the top of my head. And I love to do that. And I just made one up when I was at Brighton Bush last weekend. And just fun for me and fun for others. But I think part of where that comes from is all the improv I did at the post office. And, people walking up to me and expecting something or not knowing what to expect and kind of making it up together with them in the moment.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I think Burning Man is one big improvisational opportunity. And, the best advice that I ever got was before I even went, they said, well, when you go to Burning Man, no matter what happens, go with it. And what terrific advice for life.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So, Albert, let's talk about your dating. Who, what kind of people do you date and how do you do dating?
Great question. I think I was, like many people, really backed away from it kind of during the pandemic, and after the pandemic, it was challenging. I did go to a couple of activities online that were about dating, and I also hosted a few. I hosted a few Zooms where I used the deck Ask Deep Questions, and I invited people to come on and use that deck, but also break out into breakout rooms and meet each other. So it was sort of speed dating. It was sort of um, a little woo woo. But in the last, I guess, year, my main dating has been coming through a source in Portland, a woman named Autumn, Autumn the matchmaker. And Autumn, Autum, uh, helps uh, set people up. You do an intake form with her, and then you do an intake interview with her, and then she matches you with another person. You go to a cafe at the time that you've agreed to, and you say, "Are you with Autumn?" And then you and that other person sit down and have a coffee. The dates are 30 minutes to 45 minutes, and then you leave, and you don't exchange contact information. And then if you want to go out on another date, Autumn will set you up on another date, and you pay per date. And it's not very expensive, and it's led to going out on 10 different dates. And unfortunately, the dates have all been really good. I've really been enjoying the process. I've really enjoyed who I've met. I feel like it's a nice group of women. I'm straight male, so I'm meeting women, and they've generally been about my age. Um, and none of them have led to a second date. One person said that she wanted to meet platonically. And so we did go out a couple more times, but that sort of faded. And besides that, I have a really dynamic and active community of people who I've met through the ecstatic dance community over the years. And so I have a lot of social activity in my life. I have games nights, I have ecstatic dance, there's a lot of parties and campouts and things that are planned. But most of that are a universe of people that I already know. And I've been finding that I'm not really meeting new potential um, life partner type people through that world. Even though I've asked people in a number of ways and a number of times, please set me up with your friends, that has not come to fruition. Before I started dating in the last couple of years. Right before COVID, I had a couple of partners for a month or two here or there. And before that, I was in an 11-year long relationship with someone. And that was one of 4 long-term relationships where I had like 2 5-year relationships, a 4-year relationship, and an 11-year relationship. And so I feel like I was doing pretty good in the relationship and dating life. I like long-term relationships. I like the people who I was matched with, who I partnered with. But I feel like it's been quite a long um, uh, streak of being single, and I'm been for a while ready for meeting a next partner. And about that, I have moved for love before. So if someone who's listening is feeling the call and wants to have me come move to your town, let's talk. Um, I really prefer living in Portland after having lived in New York City, Munich, Washington, D.C., Seattle, where those were the main places that I've lived. Portland definitely feels like home, and I just love it here. So that would be another thing is if you're considering living in Portland, consider living in Portland. Um, that's something about my dating life. I also went through a period, partially when I was with the 11-year long relationship, where I was part of a very sex positive world. It was called Love Tribe, and it was here in Portland, and that led to like really a lot of boundary expanding, tantra learning, um, sex party attending experiences for probably 7 or 8 years. And I haven't really been participating in that world as much um, in recent years, but I consider it sometimes because I imagine that, my partner could be in that community. But I started to go to some events. The group in town now is called Sex Positive Portland. And I did go to some of their events, but I was finding that um, even though I liked the people that I was meeting, every time I would go to an event, it would be completely new set of people. And so each time felt like I had to start over developing new friendships and relationships. And maybe that has changed where the community has solidified some, but at that time, 4 or 5 years ago, it felt just like constantly being in new situations with new groups of people. And I like that to a point, but it wasn't leading to anything in terms of dating. So I stopped doing that. But I do feel like it's summertime and I'm going to be attending a lot of festivals. That's a place that I meet people and make new friends. So that is definitely in my future. And I think one of my key things that I've picked up in the last couple of years is that just to be really happy with the community that I have and grateful for all of the fun and joy and magic that is in my life now. Like I just have some super friends. I have a bicycle. I love to ride it. I live in a magical place of Portland, Oregon, which is just never fails to um, tickle me with how much whimsy there is here and how much creativity and smarts. There's just a lot of potential here. I part of what I want to do actually in the next year or two is figure out ways to bring people who are smart and whimsical and fun together, not just for my own entertainment, but to continue to build Portland, build it back a little bit to what it was a little while ago, but also just to build it up and make it even more fun than it already is.
So I have to admit, I have a couple questions for you.
Sure.
One thing that kind of caught my interest was these cards that you mentioned. What are
Mm,
they again?
mhm. Well, one set that I use is called Ask Deep Questions, and you can get them at askdeepquestions.com. And they were developed by a fellow World Domination Summit participant named Jan Keck, and they are wonderful. They have three different categories: brave, curious, and what was it? Brave, curious, and I forget what the third category is, but they're just fantastic cards for asking questions like, what was the greatest gift you've ever been given? Really revealing questions. The idea is to try to get away from small talk. And so we all have a tendency to be talking about the weather or whatever sneakers you just recently got. These questions kind of dive deeper into what what experiences you've had and are help us reveal to one another what we're about and make us think about where we came from and they just cause interesting conversations to happen.
Well, okay. And then my next two questions are kind of interrelated. So you mentioned Love Tribe, and that is a very Portland, Pacific Northwest thing. And so there may be people who don't understand what that is, or,
Mm,
how do you find out about it? What is your dating style? Are you polyamorous, monogamous,
hmm.
monogamish? What kind of, you know, who is Love Tribe for?
Right,
Is
right,
this
right.
something?
Well, Love Tribe was an organization that was happening from about 2002 to probably 2012, maybe a little longer. And basically, it was a group of people who just were into sex positivity and learning. We had a big pod full of futons that we would take from event to event. The futons would get set up like we used to have events at the Village Ballroom. And so upstairs, it would be dancing, and maybe there would be a snuggle space. And then downstairs, there would be a full on collection of futons. Um, and we would just, um, on the futons, there would be people walking around handing out lube, handing out condoms, keeping an eye on things. And then there would just be like sex, people having sex with their partners, people having sex with in threesomes, and a lot of just discussion. This was before the whole consent, wave. So sex positivity, which was a big part of that, is just being positive about sex and being interested in talking about it, learning about it, having it, trying to work on the shame that people carry around it. Um, so yeah, that and so now we have Sex Positive Portland, which is kind of an outgrowth of Love Tribe, and it's similar, except I think it's a little bit more. Uh, it's it's bigger, I think, and it also involves there are steps that are involved in being a part of it. So you go and you take a class on boundaries, and you go and you take a class that's called the Stars Talk, and the Stars Talk is all about how when you meet a person for the first time, and you let's say you want to have sex together, how to navigate that conversation. Talk about what is your style, what do you like, what do you dislike, what are your definite no's, what are your turn ons, what is your sex history, what's your STI history, all that kind of stuff. And that could be a 5 minute long conversation, or it could be a 30-second conversation, depending on your level of interest. But everybody should be having that kind of a conversation before they have sex with somebody new. So, and then my own personal style of dating, I think I have been in a polyamorous relationship before. And I think a lot of people think that I am polyamorous, but I'm not really that excited about polyamory. I think what I like about it is that the people who are involved in it often are fantastic at communicating. They get very good at being clear about their boundaries and clear about what they want, what they don't want. Um, but I think just personally, I am interested in a finding a partner who wants to spend a significant amount of time with me, doing simple things like going for bike rides and walking on the beach. I know it sounds very simple and straightforward, but that's kind of what I like. My 11-year long relationship was just a kind of besides there was definitely polyamorous aspects to it, but I probably would not have chosen that with my partner. I think he was a little bit more interested in that. um, and if my future partner is interested in that, I think I can bend in that direction. But I personally am not looking necessarily to have multiple lovers. I think it's a lot for me to navigate that. I was able to navigate that in the past, both in my previous relationship and also like in college. I had a summer where I had three partners, and things worked out, and everybody seemed to be enjoying themselves. But I think the kind of life that I live now, I'm somewhat stationary in Portland in my house, and moving about a smaller game board. Um, so, and I think that style just suits me, and I that's what I'm shooting for right now, and we'll see exactly what unfolds. You never really know, you know. It's it's a crapshoot a little bit of who you end up finding and how things unfold from there. But I think that's the universe that I'm um, tending towards, is somebody who's monogamous and who's heterosexual. Although if they're bisexual, it's not going to be the end of the world. Um, yeah, so that's a little bit about my current dream as a partner who I think the key thing for me is actually just somebody who has time. That seems to be a challenge for people to um, actually have time for a relationship. And I'm semi-retired right now, so I have mucho tiempo for partnership, and looking to spend it with somebody else who does as well. I'd love to find someone who'd like to travel. Thailand is still on my wish list of places to go. For instance, maybe Peru, and also parts of Eastern Oregon. There's a lot of Eastern Oregon that I haven't seen yet. In fact, there's a lot of parts of Oregon that I'd love to see. So that's a long answer to a short question. And you're muted. Oh, there you go.
Okay, so one thing I was kind of wondering about, so you mentioned, regarding Love Tribe and Sex Positive Portland, are these, organizations or groups mainly for polyamorous people?
No, I don't think so. The Sex Positive Portland, which is the only one that exists now, um, is for anyone who's seeking, who's looking around, wants to learn, wants to grow, wants to find people to play with, wants to, I don't know that I don't know how much it leads to the kind of thing that I'm looking for, which is just a single person. Um, but it might be a place to look. I, it's definitely a place where people are coming who are available for something. Um, I'll have to go and take a look again. Actually, now that I say it out loud, it feels like a definite possibility. But I would say also that I feel like Autumn, the matchmaker, has kept me busy. Having 10 dates in 6 months felt like a lot to me. That, I mean, especially coming from a year, at least a year or two, where I would maybe have one or two dates a year. So,
So, and I also want to talk about, these two groups. I just mentioned them one more time because I think people who are not used to such an idea hear it, hear, your description and think, oh, it's an orgy club. But it
mm,
sounds like there's also a lot of classes, a lot of opportunities to gain awareness. Is that correct?
mhm. Yeah, just about every activity. Um, and there's a number, people can look on our website and see what kinds of activities there are. But the first couple of times that you would go, there would be guidance, like full on. The only thing that's happening there is a class where you're learning um, boundaries, let's say, or you're learning um, how to have that stars talk that I mentioned. But then after you've done the requisite classes that you need to do, which you sort of level up, and I believe there's 4 levels. First level is you're taking these classes and you're showing up, maybe you're paying dues. Then you've graduated to a second level, and now you're able to go to a snuggle, and you're able to go to an activity where there might be a class for the first hour, and then there's more like just play time for the second hour. And then you eventually get up to, then you've got somebody maybe who's tracking you a little bit, either a mentor or somebody who's watching out for you, and you have conversations with them, maybe almost like a sponsor for AA or something, except it's a sex positivity buddy. And then that might be someone higher up in the organization who's already been through all of the levels, and they might see when you're ready to switch from a stage 2 to a stage 3. And once you're at that third level, now you're coming to a party that might just be like a sex party, where there's going to be a room that's devoted to people hooking up with each other. and navigating having sex with people that they're just meeting for the first time, or maybe you bring your partner to something and they're instigating some threesome. I don't even know exactly what that looks like these days, but when during my Love Tribe days, we had everything from pujas, which would be something where you'd have like concentric circles and people would do an exercise for 5 minutes, and then everyone in the middle circle would switch and move to the next partner. And then you might have another exercise and you move to the next partner. And the whole evening would just be that format. And then maybe afterwards, you just have a little social time where you're snacking on grapes and cheese and, just feeling the high of having been through that experience. That would be one kind of activity. And then another activity might be sort of more advanced puja where you do things like you're in groups of different size groups. You might be with your partner for one of the exercises that's like more sexual. Then you might switch to another partner or group and do things like tell the group how you want to be touched. So like you're in a group of 5 people and you just say to everybody, I want everybody to scratch my body, or I want people to pull my hair, or I want people just to use their own intuition, or I want people to massage me, so things like that. I've also been to activities where it was massaging. And so there were like 15 massage tables around the room, and there would be 3 people at each massage table. It's called massage à trois. And you basically take turns being massaged by 2 other people. And so those are very fun and very edgy. Um, and it's not for everybody. Also, a lot of times these parties or activities include a dance floor where people are dancing with each other, and can be in various levels of dress or undress. I've also helped throw some very fun sort of sexy parties, mostly just in terms of nakedness, but they weren't necessarily parties that had people necessarily having sex, but just sort of walking around naked with each other, or half dressed, half not. Did you ever come to any of those? Because you were
No,
living here when we were having parties like this. Yeah, yeah,
yeah, that's kind of that's not exactly how I do it, but as you know, I have many friends who do, and that's one of the reasons I'm really glad to hear this experience because I, as you well know, also am from the East Coast, and when I was there, we did not have anything at all like this,
right.
and I think little bits and pieces of the things you're talking about have trickled over to us in the East Coast, and we thought everybody on the West Coast was doing some wild naked hair on fire orgy.
Mm,
That's what it sounded like to us. And so hearing you explain it, um talk about the classes. I mean, I think these classes would be a terrific benefit to people, even if they were not interested in the play parties.
hmm
And I also like what you talked about regarding the different levels that you could participate in. You could take classes and you can go to a snuggle and it doesn't have to be the full on orgy, or you could just go to the massage night. You could select your level of what you feel comfortable.
hmm
So, I like that it's available to people at their different comfort levels.
hmm hmm
And, so nice to hear somebody talking about this. I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of people in our country, across the world, who have never heard about any of this stuff.
hmm the sex positive Portland group, I believe there's also a sex positive world, and I believe there are chapters in some other cities. I'm pretty sure there's one in Los Angeles as well, and I imagine in some cities you're gonna have, excuse me, something similar, just has a different name. But I'm positive that there's numerous things like this in San Francisco, and probably lots of other major cities in the country. But I agree with you that growing up, I never had any kind of sense that this type of thing existed. And I really only learned about it when I moved to Portland. and I had friends who were part of something called Love Tribe, and it also had a website which was helped you meet people who were in the community. But it all, and so you could have a profile, people could learn about you, and it was actually, it was way before its time. It was way before Facebook. It was in 2002, 2003 when I first learned about this. But yeah, I'm really glad to have had those experiences and met a lot of my current friends are people who, you know, I've been to really fun parties with. And, we, I think we're a little bit tamer now. In fact, we have this party that at the end of the summer, it's held at a friend's house. And one of the last ones we had was called Tamer, uh, in terms of just, it's gonna not wilder, but tamer. So, but that said, um, there still managed to be a lot of fun in my community. I'm very grateful for the intelligence and sexiness and fun. And so I don't, I, like I said before, I think that's one of my realizations in life these days is just to be super grateful for what I do have, even though I'm not partnering right at the moment. I am well nestled in a really lovely group of people who
Yeah,
keep me
and I think
around for some reason.
I think you bring up a good point about these things being more oriented to a city, which is why I'm glad to hear you talk about this because I mean, San Francisco is just such a bubble. And
Mm,
there's so many things that go on there that just don't go on anywhere else. And, when you live in a community like San Francisco or Portland, it's so easy to think this is what is normal and this is what's going on everywhere else. And it's not at all.
mhm.
Very unique. Um, so I'm wondering, can you talk about a date that was very memorable that stands out to you and let us know why it was memorable and how you met this person? Oh, and by the way, I also want to mention something that you mentioned about Autumn the matchmaker. Autumn matches you together.
Mhm.
Unlike OK Cupid or, Tinder where you pick each other.
Mm, yes.
So
Yeah.
that's a super interesting take on it. And sounds like Autumn is doing a pretty good job.
Yeah. Autumn's working with the cards that she has in her hand. And so, uh, every person that I've met through her was like, you know, in the right ballpark. They were very sensible. None of them, it turned out, I expressed interest in a number of them and they did not express interest back. And so, you never know how you're going to get to two yeses, but I'm looking forward to a time when that does happen. That hasn't happened yet. But a date that was very memorable was my previous partner. We met on the dance floor at the Village Ballroom. And I remember reaching out my hands as I was stretching before the dance started, and I'm just reaching out. And suddenly I reached out to some toes, and the toes were playing with my fingers. And I kind of looked up and saw who it was. And the next time we saw each other at the same dance, I asked her if she wanted to go out for breakfast afterwards. So we went to a cafe called the Cricket Cafe on Belmont and 32nd, 33rd. And we had breakfast and it was lovely. And we were all high from the dance that we had been to and, just all wound up. And it was the first time that we had done anything together. And so it was our first time meeting each other really and talking. And so we talked and then we as our food was being prepared, there weren't that many people in the restaurant anymore. It was kind of later. It's just a brunch place. We had probably got there at like 1 in the afternoon, so it's probably closing at 2. So let's say it's like 1:30. Maybe there's two or three other tables that were eating. Well, we got up during the time that the um, food was being prepared, and we just danced with each other around the restaurant. just did a waltz or we were just ecstatic dancing. But I remember it was sort of like partner dancing. And then we ate our brunch, and then we got up and we danced some more while they were closing the restaurant. And then I walked her to the bus stop where she caught the bus to go home. And I went my merry way and she went her merry way. And yeah, that ended up leading to an 11-year long relationship. And, it was, that was the meeting part. I'd be curious to see how she would describe it, but I think, and actually, now we're continuing to be really good friends. We just had a blast together up at Brighton Bush last weekend, sitting by a river together. And one of the things that we like to do is ideate. So that's like thinking about business ideas. And what was the business? Oh, we have this idea for a food item that doesn't really exist, and it has to do with horseradish. And so someday maybe we will make it go. Okay, I'm just going to give away the idea because like it would be great to see this actually manifested by someone. I don't think it's a huge secret. It's called jubu sabi, and so uh, it's like basically wasabi, jubus, Passover, different flavored um, horseradish. So it could be currants or currants and raisins, so mixed in with the horseradish, give it a little bit of a fruity flavor. Anyway, I think it would be a very fun idea, and maybe we'll get around someday to actually making it go. We did do a trial run where we Vitamixed or food processed, like, I don't know, a couple pounds of horseradish, and then we mixed it with different things, and it was delicious, and it lasts forever. And for those who likes horseradish or wasabi, it's your thing, and for those who don't, it's not your thing. So, but anyway, that was a very good first date and very lovely relationship, um, and good friend now. So, yay.
Well, Albert, that's funny because, so many times I was going to ask you with Autumn if you ever got, feedback because people, we always wonder, what was it I did right? What was it I did wrong? But yet,
Mm,
this first meeting story, um, it just seems so coincidental. It seems like the main ingredient of this love story was chemistry, and it just seems like neither one of you, I mean, I don't know if I'm saying this the right way, but it seems like neither one of you was really trying, and it just happened. It seems like,
mm.
momentum must have taken over. I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, I think there's definitely some truth to that. And I feel like that's just how I've met people in the past too, is just very synchronicity, you know. Never met someone at Burning Man, 14 times going, never met a single person that I've dated. I don't think. Um, but it's always been somewhat random. Like I'm at a party and I'm playing guitar and somebody sees me and I see them, or going to Brighton Bush at the summer solstice healing retreat a number of years back. I met somebody and then we were both in relationships at the time. And I came back the following year and we were both single and we started dating and dated for 4 years. Um, Previous person, I was at grad school, met the person at a party that we were both at, and then I ended up moving to Germany and living with her because she was an exchange student and she went back to Germany. I ended up moving to Germany and living there for like 3.5 years over the course of 5 years. I did a little bit of back and forth in the beginning part so I could finish my degree, but then I ended up moving there. And one other person, I met her at a music camp, and we were taking a walk around the lake at the music camp, and we started to talk about how we neither one of us wanted to have kids, and population growth issues, and then one person would say, oh, yeah, definitely don't want to have kids. And when I heard her say that, I was like, ooh. At that time I was in my 30s, and I was like, oh, somebody, a woman in her 30s that doesn't want to have kids, like that's kind of interesting. Like didn't want to have kids at all. In fact, she walked me to and took me and actually was in the appointment while I got a vasectomy and encouraged me to go get the vasectomy. And I was like, I was down for it. And then it was very funny because after we were together for 4 or 5 years, her next partner she ended up having a child with, like pretty much right away, and that child is now 18 or 20 or something at college. Yeah, but it was funny because we she had said such a strong desire not to have children, and then she goes and has a kid, but it's fine. And we're
Wow.
still friends. That's nice.
So I guess what it sounds to me like, you have met your best, most compatible, long-lasting partners when you were just having fun.
Yes, 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 yes.
And, another good reason to go out there and try all those things and do what I call spinning the wheel.
Hmm. Okay.
It sounds like every time you spin the wheel, you create the opportunity, the possibility to meet somebody or to change your life in, some way.
Hmm.
So, I'm just curious, just for those of us who, haven't done as well in dating. I mean, was there a time when your date just went wrong, in a way that you can laugh about? I'm not talking about, a disaster
Mm,
kind of, but like, have you ever had a date that just didn't turn out the way you thought? And like, how did you deal with it on your date? How did you process it afterward?
mm. Well, one of the Autumn the Matchmaker dates that happened recently, I almost all of them have been during the day, and they've all been at coffee shops around Portland. And that's been actually one of the really nice advantages of this system is that I've gotten to know 10 new coffee shops that I didn't know about before. I've only been to one of them, one where it's been a repeat. The other nine, or I guess the other eight, were in different places. And so I went to one at night. It's like 7:30, 8 o'clock at night, and I go and I'm at the door, entry to the place, and the person who walks up is, obviously there for a date. She's very dressed up, and I say, "Are you with Autumn?" And she says, "Yes." And it was somebody who I dated before, and so there we were, um, matched together. And what do you do? And so we decided, well, we'll just go have our little date. And I said to her, so instead of having coffee, now we're having drinks. And I picked a slushy drink. And I got so drunk so fast off of the slushy drink that I was like kind of drunk just after one drink and sitting with her. And she wasn't really drunk. But anyway, we talked a little bit, and we had gone out once before, 5 years previous. And I was like, oh, yeah, I remember that. And I was like, I was always sad that you didn't contact me and we didn't go out again. And she's like, oh, did you think that was a date? And I was like, yeah, I did. And so, from that moment on, I realized, okay, well, this person's likely not going to be a yes. And so I just, went on with the night, but I did say yes, that I would like to see her again. And she said no. And now we'll see when we see each other again. But what's interesting too is that she's sort of somewhat in my circle of friends. So there is a chance that I will see her again. But I was also thinking about your comment reminded me of a speed dating event that I went to in Seattle. It was Jewish speed dating because I'm Jewish. And at least two of the people in the speed dating group, one of them was somebody who I had dated before, where, yeah, we were definitely not dating again. So that was awkward. And then there was another person in the group of people who was part of co-counseling, which is a personal growth activity that I'm involved in. And part of co-counseling is that you don't socialize with the people that you co-counsel with. So anyone that you meet in the co-counseling universe, you're not supposed to have any other kind of relationship with. And I believe that is a good thing, and I stick with it. But here we were at a speed dating event. So instead of having a chit chat, we actually took the time and exchanged it in a co-counseling manner, which was kind of bizarre and awesome and very creative, and was one way to kind of keep to our no socializing policy. But I love that speed dating event. I'll never forget it. It was probably 1998 or something, but yet it still sticks with me in a very strong way. And I still go, in a way, the things that I'm involved in now, like I'm part of the Alignable platform, which is a little bit like LinkedIn. It's for business to business networking. And one of the really cool aspects of their platform is called Smart Connect, and it's a business to business speed dating activity where you come on to a Zoom setting, you're in a room with, could be 100 people, could be 20 people, could be 500 people, and then boom, you're set off with one other person. You might have been given a prompt or something, and then you just network with them for 7 minutes, and then boom, you're back to the big group, and then boom, you're back to another person, and you're just continuing to do that mixing until an hour passes, and then you're done. So in the course of that, you have 8 people that you've met, and then you have the opportunity to stay connected with them if you want to or not. And even though it is supposedly for business to business networking, I'm sure there's lots of people that have all sorts of different kinds of relationships that come from it. I'm sure people have moved across the country because they fall in love with somebody else. I'm sure there's lots of franchising going on, and hiring and firing and all the stuff. So I still participate in things that are where you're sorting, where you're learning about people and you're continuing with them or you're not. And I do enjoy that.
So I have two questions. My first question, I think I kind of threw it out there a little lightly before. Number one, have you ever gotten any feedback? And number two, what are your insights that you have gained from all these years of dating that you might share and enlighten us with?
Sure. Okay. Well, first of all, around Autumn the Matchmaker, no, there has been no feedback from her. Basically, she just takes the feedback that you give back about the other person and uses it to hone, hopefully, her next pick for you and her next picks for you. Um, yeah. And so I guess some feedback that I've gotten is there one matchmaking thing that wasn't with Autumn was with something called Talkify, and the person who I went out with wanted to didn't want to have another Talkify date, but wanted to get my number and meet me platonically. So I guess I've had a little bit of feedback of like people want to be my friend. They're excited to be my friend and not necessarily be romantic with me, which is that's nice. In fact, that's probably a good place to start for any of these people would be to like develop deeper friendships. So actually, maybe that leads into the advice is for all of us is to, I think be on the lookout for people who are, potential friends. Because after you've been friends with somebody for a while, you that could potentially lead to something more. Whereas if you jump into bed with somebody quickly, that might be all that it is. It might last for a little while, but if you don't work on the friendship side of it, I don't think that that kind of thing is going to hold up for long. Let's see, any other wisdom that I have? Well, I guess what comes to mind is I was just thinking like have a good time. I think we tend to in all relationships want them to work a certain way. We want to have like things nailed down and sure. And I think and so there's always a lot of processing, especially early on in many relationships. And I would say skip that and just go have a good time. Go do fun things together. Do fun things with each other. Like go, go to we have this really awesome thing in town right now called Hopscotch, which is this light museum thing. It's a little bit like Meow Wolf, up in Santa Fe. So we have something like I would say do that. Go for a bike ride, go for walks, get to know each other, try things out, and I say like, don't get too into the heavy processing too early. I think there'll be plenty of time for that if you decide that you're compatible enough to continue on as a partner with the other person. So, and that's some advice I need to like not only say out loud but remind myself, because I think we can all get caught uh, in the processing. Um, you didn't do this right. You didn't do that right. I want it to be like this. I want it to be like that. Instead of just let's go see a movie, read a book together, make food together. I'd say like emphasize more the activities and the actual just enjoyment of time, and you'll have plenty of time to process, you know, um, in the future. But I think people seem to get into that a little bit too heavily in the beginning. I think another thing is, oh my God, I, this is a weird thing to say, but something around men. Um, I just feel for women, as you know, in the heterosexual world, having to interact with the men. Uh, we, I feel like we need training a lot of the time. Um, how to be a good partner with the person that we connect with, how to communicate, how to know how we're feeling, what we're feeling, what to do with our feelings. I feel like your book, Charm School for Men, is something that men should probably read and or listen to. I've been listening to it today, but I I recognize, because I'm interacting with a lot of men and I'm doing a lot of men's work over the years, that many men really are not um, sort of up to the level of the women in our society. And I understand why a lot of people are single, who want to have a man woman interaction. And actually, it probably affects gay men as well. And I think for men, a way forward is there's lots of good books to read. Um, there are men's groups to join. There, I would say I would say any man who wants to improve their dating and just their lives in general should be in a men's group that meets like minimum twice a month. And if they can find their way to do things like co-counseling, rc.org is the website for that to learn more about that. That would be a good recommendation. But men die younger than women, and a big part of it, I think, is we're our. I mean, that's a longer talk. I could talk for hours about men's liberation and the oppression of men, but partly it's what we do to ourselves. Partly it's the upbringings that we've had and the examples that have been poorly set for us. But there's a lot that could be done by men to improve our lives and improve our relationships. And unfortunately, it's coming out a lot in the press these days that men are relying on women for their social lives. They're relying on women to provide friends to hang out with. They're relying on women to care for them. And that's not what women want to do. Women want partners, they want equals, they want people who can communicate with them about everything. And I am sad to report that not just men, but many women as well, I think, are not doing some of the work that they could be doing to get there. But I think women have a head start, partly because they're allowed to cry and laugh and yawn in ways that men have been shut down around, particularly crying. You know, that's one of the things I like to do is go to movies by myself and just cry, cry, cry. If anyone wants a great recommendation for a good crying movie, the new John Krasinski movie called If. Go see that, cry, go by yourself, cry, cry, cry. It's a good one. But there's lots of movies to cry to. In fact, I think I can go to most rom-coms. If I go by myself, I'll find, a good chance to help get me crying. Also, there's lots of great music that is good for crying. Um, and I'll just finish with that. David Wilcox. That's what I
So,
recommend.
Albert, thank you so much for mentioning the book I wrote, Charm School for Men. It's the inspiration, for this show. And I just feel like my main goal and objective is to really build that bridge of communication and understanding. And, I understand the challenges for men as best I can as a woman. And, just really trying to like bridge that gap and get conversations going, questions answered, and, making men feel a little bit more safe,
Mm.
in expressing, what's tripping them up, what's confusing them. I'm wondering if you could tell us, what in that book stands out that's been helpful to you?
Mm.
Well, I'm really at the early stages of it. I'm probably in chapter 2 or 3, and I'm just enjoying hearing your voice talk. Um, I think just the idea that there's such a thing is grounds for hope. Charm School for Men. Um, yeah, it's one of a number of resources that are out there. And I imagine you're going to have like a link to the audio download or something for people on the podcast platform. So if that is there, people should definitely download it and give it a listen. Um, I just think it's just delightful to be to have created such a thing. It's very forward thinking. It sort of stands out there by itself. I don't really actually know much that's like it. But actually, there is a podcast out there that I've also found very helpful, called Dating While Gray, and done by a woman named Laura Stasi. But I think your audience is maybe going to be a little bit different, probably a little younger, maybe a little bit more burnerific.
Mhm.
And so we'll see. We'll see where it goes.
So, my last question, kind of a burning question. Do you have any outstanding questions, things that you've ever wondered about? Have women ever baffled you in a way that you've never, that's remained a mystery? Because I know you have a lot of female friends, and I know you do a lot of, like you said, these incredible groups you're a part of with all of this communication that goes way above and beyond. But
Mm.
are there any mysteries remaining?
Yeah, I'd say I don't like the mystery that I have. It's not such a mystery, but where my mind went as you're asking that question was I have a number of women friends. I have actually one woman friend and one woman who I met through the World Domination Summit who um, we're not friends, but I was very impressed by her intelligence, her what she's doing with her life, how she's doing her life, and both of these people are very smart. They read books that I feel are a bit beyond me. The way they communicate feels sort of not above me, but just beyond my grasp in a way. I don't feel like the intellectual equal of either of them. And so I don't know what my question is or what my search is, and I'm not necessarily wanting to be like in their league or date them, although there's certain aspects of who they are that are very attractive. Um, but it's just very interesting to me that there are people out there that kind of communicate at a higher level than I do. And I I just I don't know, in a way I just don't even know what to do with it. I don't know. I have difficulty being around them, um and feeling like I'm holding my own. So there's a little bit of that going on a little bit. And I'm wise enough to know that we're all in this together, and they're not trying to harm me or um uh insult me or anything like that, but they just definitely are firing on more cylinders than I am. I think it's partly because they're also doing a lot of physical activity, and I am not doing as much as they are. So there's a way that like they're physically powerful people, um, and I think that going is probably helping their mental acuity, and they've got that going on, and so that combination really is something that I'm in awe of, and so I am very I'm just in awe of it. I'm not trying to attain it necessarily, although I do like to try to keep building my vocabulary and memory and physical stamina and all of these things. But I talk about it probably more than I actually do it. So um, that is a place that I'm curious about that. I'm not, um, but in other respects, I feel like in terms of just my interactions with other humans, I feel pretty competent in terms of like who I am and my own body, my own mind, my own communication ability, and who I interact with. That feels like it goes generally pretty smoothly. I feel well loved, well liked. I was going to say well loved by the universe. I get a lot of positive feedback about who I am in the universe. And not everybody likes me, and I don't need that. I don't expect that. I do a lot of button pushing stuff in the world, trying to stop people from using gas powered tools doesn't make you a hit at everybody's party. But in general, I feel like things are going well in terms of my relationships with other people, and I'll have to think on that one. Um, I'm sure there are I'm sure there are lots more surprises ahead. I think one actually is probably has to do with death and end of life. As I get older, I'm 63 now. Um, I'm seeing my parents kind of coming to the end of life, and all of my peers are aging, and so we're all watching each other, have various issues come up, whether it's everything from cancer to heart attacks to just slowing down. Like I've got this one friend who I really would love to do more concert going with, and he's like, I'm just not interested in live music anymore. I don't want to go see live music. And we play music together, and part of the inspiration for playing for me is hearing really great musicians. That helps me get out and see to get out and see it helps me play it. Yeah.
So one thing that I thought was kind of interesting that I heard you say is these women who are so intelligent, so quick-witted, so physically fit. Um, to me, it sounds like they are a little intimidating. Do you think
Mm,
that's a good word?
absolutely. Yes.
And, Albert, that is something that has fascinated me throughout the years of, men finding these super high powered women intimidating because a lot of times women are kind of put in the position where they have to do it all and
Mm,
they have to be in their mask and they have to for survival. And such a conundrum that these women I don't know if I want to say feel that, are just brought to these circumstances where they have to be performing at a certain level, and yet men are intimidated.
hmm.
And I've met so many women who are like, well, yeah, so what? I mean, we can still have fun.
Right.
And I guess I'm kind of wondering, as a man who's had those feelings, like, what can be done either for a man or for a woman about such things.
Well, as you first started talking about this topic, I realized that every woman that I've dated um, is a strong woman, is a very strong woman, and that has just been who I've attracted and who I've stayed with. They're all just super powerful, and yeah, there's some part of me that's like, oh, I wish, I'd love to have like my next partner be just like a little less on the power side, a little bit more just feminine or just like a little lighter, not so heavy or not so like passionate about changing the world necessarily. But I am that. So maybe that's part of why I'm attracting people who are like that. Um, what I don't know, I mean, partly what could happen, and I talked about it a little bit earlier, is if we're talking about heterosexual couples,
is for men to do more work, to be able to be with somebody who's powerful and not feel threatened by that. Or, there's so many different, that's a whole nother podcast perhaps, is, how that could work. But I think that it's a challenging topic, because I don't think that it's not like in most men, was coming to my mind was like most men are not up to the task. But there's some truth to that, and it'll be interesting actually. I'm watching my parents' generation as they, pass on. Um, that was maybe the start. My mother was, a valedictorian at her high school, and then she got a free scholarship to college. And that was the right around that time when she was in high school. Women were still going to college until they got married, and then boom, they were making babies, and we had the 50s. But later, we had the 60s, and we have our generation, the end of the baby boomer generation, where there are a lot more women who are powerful and, running lots of important things in our society. And many of them manage to have a career and kids, or just a career. And so it'll be interesting to see as though that as our cohort ages, and suddenly it's already the case that there's a lot more women, older women available than compared to older men. It's like, it's 100 to 70 or 80, that kind of thing, for every 7 men who are in their 60s, let's say, you've got 100 women who are in their 60s, because men die earlier, because many people are still in partnerships. Anyway, there's a significant gap between the two groups. And I'm just sort of theorizing here, but if you imagine that there's lots more strong women in these age groups, it's going to be an interesting, and it probably is already for dating right now, situation for both sides. But it's not as interesting if you're the smart person and you're the powerful woman and you're having difficulty finding anybody who can keep up with you. And I would imagine there is some of that going on.
Well, I have to say, I always think back to this girl in college. She was from Turkey. She was beautiful. She had great manners. I mean, I wasn't friends with her, but, I saw her walking around campus and I saw her in the commissary. And all of my guy friends just thought she was stunning and they were all blown away with her by her. And I never saw her dating somebody or with a guy, and it just felt like everybody was so incredibly intimidated by this woman, and I felt bad for her. And I said to my and I've heard it time and time again, especially I, having worked in the entertainment industry, being certain, and Burning Man as well, all these incredible, powerful, gorgeous women. And I feel like with Burning Man it was a little different because I feel like in that environment, in that community, people are a little bit more free to be their authentic selves. I feel like that authenticity is a little bit more of a bottom line at Burning Man, and it's a little bit more accepted. But I feel like a lot of women are wondering to themselves, like, how can I be my true authentic self without, and I don't want to say it in a way that sounds like it's blaming women, because it's not, but in a way that and still be inviting, or
Mm.
do it in a way that's not scaring the boys.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, of course I say that, and I don't mean, that these men are immature and they're boys. And I'm not saying that as a value judgment, but I'm just saying, like, how to be yourself without scaring the guys away. And like you said, you admire these women, you're not trying to date them, but I think it sounds like you're making the assumption that they'd want a peer. And I say to myself, well, Albert might not be communicating or having a level of functionality or physical fitness on the level of these women. But I feel, in my opinion, Albert is bringing many, many things to the table that would benefit these women in their lives. And it might not be a tit for tat equal match thing, you
Mm,
know. So I'm so passionate about putting it out there. And I think as a woman, I think for me, like when I'm looking at a relationship, one of the questions I ask myself is, does this relationship make my life easier?
mhm,
And, you know, like you said, women are tasked with, you know, being communicators and the social coordinator and et cetera. And, you know, even if a man isn't, you know, as intellectually intelligent or emotionally intelligent as me, even if he doesn't have the exact same skill set, if he is bringing something else to the table that is enriching,
mhm,
that is very, very valuable to me. And I also want to mention, even if a man is not making as much money as me or is making as much money as a woman, you know, I'm not going to say that's not important to all the women, but I think men are putting a little bit of misplaced value on that, because people bring a lot of things to the table that I do not think they are always accounting for.
mm, mhm.
So
Yeah. Um, yeah, my mind just sort of went blank around that. But yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see it. I'm sure be curious to hear what some of your female guests have to say, when you bring them on, around all of this. It's definitely something that I'm thinking about. And yeah, in terms of my own sense around the two women that I'm thinking of, and like in terms of dating, like one of the people is just super polyamorous and has a really wonderful primary partner, and is not someone who I consider um, uh, partnering with, but who I love being with and dancing with, and contact improving with and stuff. Um, but the other person was somebody who kind of popped into my life, who I was like, oh, like I like the feel and looks of this person, but I feel like they probably looked to me and were maybe sussing out that I'm not uh, fit for their, it was just not a match for them. But, it was somebody who I was kind of very impressed by and very attracted to. And yet, I could just tell kind of right off the bat. Actually, the person said to me, uh, wrote me a note, said, "Oh, I looked up at your stuff at your online. You seem like a very cookie cutter Portland person." And I was like and it felt like an insult. But at the time, I was actually running for office. I was running to be Multnomah County Commissioner, and it came at me in such a way that I was like, wow, if I'm a cookie cutter Portland person, then damn, this town is fine. You know,
yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know,
if every man was doing what I'm doing to like fix things and to just build community and um, just bring joy to their neighbors and stuff, then fuck yeah, I want to live here. Like, yeah, all right. But at the same time, I just took it in and actually made a fun graphic out of it, like, and used it as my cover photo in a couple of places for a while. I was just like, I'm just a cookie cutter Portland guy.
well, I have to admit, some of your hilarious stories did remind me of the TV show Portlandia, and I
Oh
always
yeah.
see episodes write themselves having, met you in Portland, and for all your wild, wacky adventures and interesting quirks, you are a somewhat typical Portland man, and you're right.
All
You
right
know,
then.
you have
And
found your people in Portland. The other thing I want to mention before we wrap up, it's just been a wonderful conversation with you. I just love all the resources that you've shared, and we'll try to get some links to those. I want to talk about something I mentioned in Charm School for Men, and that is the importance of female friends. I think,
Mm.
I've always felt that one of the reasons gay men get along so well with women and have such a good understanding of women is they are not looking to get sex out of these women. They're not um, looking to utilize women in the same way that heterosexual men do. And because of that, they learn so much about women. And I think that information is invaluable. I think that when a woman is not in a relationship, there is a level of safety where we can truly share our minds and our hearts. And I really think that that is going to set up a heterosexual man for success because men and women, we think really differently, and one is not better than the other, but it is different. And so, it requires us stepping out of our comfort zone to truly be neutral and put a lot of things aside so we can truly hear somebody else. And, I think that's where that wisdom comes from. And I think that when there is somebody that you do not want something from, like a relationship or sex, I think you can hear people a lot more clearly.
Yeah, and you're onto something. It just reminds me of I just feel like it's an age-old quandary of like, can men and women just be friends? It's not just me who said that, but there's been books written about it and movies about it. When Harry Met Sally comes to mind, or I've been binge watching Northern Exposure lately, and the two central characters, Fleischman and Maggie, uh, they're constantly on the edge of having sex. They finally do have sex, and then they afterwards are like, "Wait, what do we have? What do we have between us?" Because there's a lot of tension between them as well. Um, but yeah, I think you're onto something. I have a lot of women friends and who I've never partnered with, and I think it is valuable. Absolutely. And I'm looking forward to my next partner when and if they show up.
Well, I'm sure they will. You are such an interesting, talented, and charming man. And I am so delighted that we got to have that conversation. And please tell us one more time, where can we find out more about you?
Sure. My website is albertideation.com, Albert Ideation, and that's a place to find me. I'm on all the social media stuff. Actually, it's not totally true. I'm mostly just on Facebook and Instagram, but mostly, yeah, my newsletters are a good way to find out who I am and my website. Yeah. Thanks so
Can
much for
we
having
sign up
me.
for your newsletter on your website, Albert,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
ARTIDEATION.com?
EA. That's right.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Albert.
Thank you.